Hello and welcome to AdQ&A Live episode 24. I'm Nick Sinitra and today we're talking about offline conversions. We're going to talk about offline conversions both for Facebook and for Google Ads, and we're going to talk about what they are, why you should care, how you should use them, and all that stuff. And yeah, we're going to get into it. Also, for all you podcasters out there or people who are just watching and enjoy podcasts, happy International Podcast Day. And I guess happy International Podcast Day to me. So cool. Let's jump into it. All right. So offline conversions, what are they? Let's say that you advertise online, but you also have a physical store, right? So we have a couple of advertisers like this that maintain, one or more stores with a physical presence, brick and mortar. And one of the challenges for them is that they would love to, if possible, understand the extent to which their online marketing efforts drive in-store sales. Now, for those of you who watched my conversion tracking pixel episode or just familiar with the subject in general, you know that for the most part, online conversion tracking is done via pixels, right? So if somebody is coming in there and converting in the store, you might think, well, there's no way that we can fire a pixel on that. And you're right. But that's not to say that you can't still attribute a conversion back to your paid media. The way that this is approached is a little bit different between Google Ads and Facebook, and I'll talk about the differences. But so that's kind of the what, right? I guess the why is sort of why should you care? Why would you want to do that? I mean, really, at the end of the day, any savvy marketer wants to be able to draw a line between their spend and their results, right? So if you're spending money online and you know or suspect that you are having an impact on in-store sales, you'd love to be able to quantify that, right? Because maybe you're not hitting your CPA targets from a pure, digital play perspective, but you also know that you have this sort of ancillary benefit where even though you're only a little bit better than break even online, you're actually driving a decent volume of in-store sales. And maybe the only way that you know this today is because you're asking people when they're checking out, in the store, oh, how'd you hear about us? No, I saw an ad on Facebook or whatever it is, right? But this actually lets you attribute it to not just to the online spend, but even to a specific ad, right? And this is really key because if you're like most advertisers and you're running a handful of different campaigns and different targeting buckets and different creatives, maybe you've got some static, you've got some video, maybe you've got some event ads over here and you've got different stuff going on, you want to be able to know which one's actually driving the best performance, not just online, but offline as well. Cool, so hopefully that will suffice as an explanation for what it is and why you should care. Now, as far as how you actually do it, I'm going to start with the easy one. So Facebook is cool in this regard because basically all you need is PII, or personally identifying information, right? So let's say in this scenario that somebody's coming into your store and whatever it is that you sell, a person is buying this item, and at the time they check out, you ask them and they agree to provide their information. So first name, last name, maybe a phone number, maybe an email address, right? Email address is key. That's kind of the sine qua non, right, when it comes to online attribution. So let's say, again, for the sake of argument, that you get their first name, you get their last name, and you at least get their email address, right? And of course, you need the date on which the conversion occurred. So what can you do with this? Well, in Facebook, and we can do kind of a hands-on tutorial on this later, but there's this idea of an offline event set. The tricky thing about the offline event set is that it's a container for the offline events, and you actually need to create it as early as possible because any offline conversion event won't be attributed to an ad viewer click that occurred prior to this bucket existing. In other words, let's say you you're an agency or independent contractor or whatever, and you sign up a client who has a physical presence, right? They have a brick and mortar shop, and you sign them at the beginning of June, right? And then you forget to create the offline event set until August, right? Well, any conversions that happened between June and August, you're not going to be able to get credit for those because the container didn't exist at that time. It's a little bit silly. I mean, the data's still there. It's in Facebook. It kind of feels like a little bit of an arbitrary restriction, but essentially it is the way it is. So my suggestion for you, whether you're an agency or whether you're, running your own campaigns or you're an independent contractor, I'd suggest as part of your onboarding process, set up this offline conversion event set at the earliest possible opportunity when you're setting up the account, when you're setting the payment method, because it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it, right? Okay, cool. So back to the point. So now, let's say that you did set it up in June, and this whole time you've been collecting data. So now you've got a list of, let's say 200 people that have purchased in your store. And again, you've got their first name, last name, email address. Well, what you're going to do is you're going to format this file a certain way and you're going to make sure to indicate the date that the conversion happened, along with what the conversion event is, whether it's a purchase or webinar registration or whatever you want to call it, right? And you're going to upload it into Facebook. And then Facebook is essentially going to do a 3-step process to see whether or not you get attribution for that event. So the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to look at the actual first name and last name and email address, and they're going to see if that person even has a Facebook account, right? First and foremost, they're going to figure out if that person could have even seen the ad on Facebook, right? Obviously, if you don't have a Facebook account, you can't see ads on Facebook. Boom, simple. So that's the first thing they do. So let's say, again, you uploaded that list of 200 people, Facebook goes through, and then there's what's called sort of a match rate, right? And that is as a proportion of the total data set that you uploaded, what percentage of them actually were matched by Facebook. In other words, Facebook was able to find them as an actual Facebook user, right? So that's step one. Now, step two is Facebook is going to go, okay, well, you're saying that this person converted. I mean, your hope is that they converted as a result of seeing or clicking on an ad online. Facebook is then going to go look and see, did they ever see or click your ad, right? That's kind of step number two. And then the third step is that they're going to go, okay, well, offline conversion events essentially use the same default attribution window, right? And I don't remember the exact episode, but check it out because we've got a whole episode on attribution windows and methods and things like that, models. Okay, so by default on Facebook, the attribution model that's used, or sorry, window that's used is a 1-day view, 28-day click, right? So the third thing that Facebook is going to do is they're going to go, okay, we established that John Smith, jsmith@yahoo.com or whatever, is in fact a Facebook user. Cool, that's step one, boom. And we've established that they did actually see and click on your ad on such and such date. But the third step is they're going to look at that attribution window and say, okay, well, can Facebook actually take credit? Because if you're on a 1-day view, 28-day click, and this person, let's say, only saw your ad 50 days before they converted, right, then you're not going to get credit because it's basically outside of the default attribution window, right? So 3 steps, right? You upload the data, well, that's sort of step one, and then Facebook does the 3 steps. First, they check and see if that person's a user. Then they see, did that person actually see and or click on your ad? And then third step is, did they see and or click on your ad within a short enough time frame of them converting that ad that drove the view or click can actually get credit, right? So that's basically how that works. And the cool thing with this, why I said this is more simple relative to Google, I'll explain more in a sec, but Facebook basically does most of the heavy lifting from an analysis standpoint. You just plug in the data. That's a very simple process, just need a little bit of formatting. And then Facebook does all the rest of the work. They've got all that stuff data-based, right? They never delete anything as far as we know. So it's all there, right? You could go back indefinitely as far as we know, as long as your event set existed at the time that you're saying the conversion happened, right? That's the key point. Now, Google Ads. Google Ads is a bit of a tricky one. So Google Ads asks for the same data, but they ask for one additional piece, which is called the GCLID or Google Click Identifier. Yeah, Google Click ID, right? So GCLID. Now, Facebook has something similar. You'll notice both Google and Facebook have this, where if you click on an ad that you see on Google or on Facebook, you'll see usually a parameter that's appended to the end of the URL when that landing page actually resolves. So let's say you're going to like nicksbargainshoes.com, you would see, nicksbargainshoes.com, question mark FBCLID equals, and then a long alphanumeric string, right? And then, or be GCLID, long alphanumeric string. Now, the tricky thing is with the Facebook Click ID, you don't really need to do anything with that, right? With Google, you actually need to capture that and upload it. Because essentially what Google is doing, as best we can tell, is that they're creating this sort of index, right? Where that is sort of the value that's used to look up all the other information. So, I don't know why they don't just follow Facebook's model, right? They have all the data, it's out there somewhere. But essentially what Google does is they go, okay, this ID encapsulates all of the relevant information that we need to know. It's who saw the ad, what was the ad, when did it happen, X, Y, Z, blah, 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 right? But from a practical standpoint, this is really tricky, right? Because if you take that sort of in-store approach, right, what it means is you really have to have like a CRM in order to tie all these things together. So let me run through a practical example. So I do a search for shoes, discount shoes, let's say, and I see an ad for Nick's Bargain Shoes. and I go, oh, cool, that's exactly what I'm looking for. And so I click on it and I go to the website. And at that time, the Google Click ID, that value is generated, the long alphanumeric string. Now, I need to somehow find a way to capture that value and associate it with my information should I make a purchase, right? Or even if I don't, right? So let's say that they get some information about me, or not, right? Somehow that needs to go live on a database or CRM somewhere, and then when the information is basically captured in the store, I need to figure a way to associate it back to the Google Click ID, right? So that when I upload my list of offline conversion events, I basically have that Google Click ID appended. Hopefully I'm doing a decent job explaining this. Essentially, think about it as there's one essential data point, and the onus is really on you, the advertiser, to capture that and database it. And the good news is, if you go look at some of the support articles, there are ways in like Google Tag Manager, for instance, to just use basic settings to just capture this automatically. But at the end of the day, you do still need to have a way to export all of that, right? And be able to post it. And depending on how your Google Analytics is set up, you may also be registering that in your landing pages section, right? So if you don't have things in place just kind of suppress all those extra parameters, you can sometimes see a whole page full of landing pages, each one with a unique value that's that alphanumeric string. And you could also theoretically export that and blah, 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 right? So it's just it's a whole big ordeal. Unfortunately, they don't make it quite as easy on you. And the Google Click ID, unfortunately, is a required field. So you can't just upload the name, email address, phone number, conversion date, etc. You actually need to have that Google Click ID in there. And yeah, so again, I don't really know why it is this way. It's kind of annoying, and practically speaking, it makes it very difficult for people to actually use offline conversion tracking in Google, whereas with Facebook, it's very, very straightforward. So yeah, so I mean, that's probably a quick one. Let me see, I've been talking about 12 minutes. That's about all I got today. Hopefully that explains, again, just to recap, what are offline conversion events? Essentially, it's allowing you to draw a straight line between paid media spend and then some offline event, whether that's in-store sale, or it's maybe a closed deal. Let's say, for instance, you're generating leads, right? And those leads are going to be worked by a sales team by phone, right? The conversion event, when they say like, yes, I want to buy your whatever, is not happening on a web page. Therefore, that pixel's not going to fire. But assuming that in the course of that call, you're capturing all their information, their name, email address, phone number, etc., you could then go push that back into Facebook and then see right there in the platform, oh, this ad drove this many offline conversions, whereas this one only drove this many. Therefore, this one has the better cost per action, where that action is an offline event, right? That's kind of the use case. And then we went through basically how you actually do that. Facebook, very straightforward. Google Ads, not so much, unfortunately. And yeah, and so hopefully you found that interesting. As usual, if you enjoy this, please don't hesitate to like and subscribe. Tell your friends. If there are any topics that you want us to cover, don't be shy. Hit us up in the comments, or send us an email. I think use our general email that's on the adQuadrant website. And yeah, thank you for watching, and tune in next time. Thank you. Bye.